Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Trail. Today is episode 4, and we are going to North Carolina. And I have with me today special guest Peyton Thomas, who is in North Carolina. Peyton, what city are you in?
So I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, right on the coast.
Okay. So yeah, it's great to have you on today and to talk a little bit about your experience as a trail runner, an environmental advocate, and yeah, just to get to know you a little bit better. So thanks everyone for tuning in. And Peyton, let's just start with you. How did you get into trail running?
So I guess technically I've been running trails my entire life. Well, my entire life, but since I've been running, which was in high school, but I didn't really get into the sport of trail running until a couple of years ago when I came to Wilmington, actually. So there are a bunch of relay races here. And so one is the Copperhead Relay, which is one where you essentially drink a beer before you run a 5K on trails and you have a team. And so that one's pretty fun. And then the other one that really got me interested in ultra racing actually was this relay called the Southern Tour Ultra. And so I did the relay race with my team where each person runs 5 miles, but there was also an option to do a 50K. And so there was this woman that I met at the ultra race, and she was talking about this really awesome race called the Bigfoot 200, which is part of a series of races along the Cascade Mountains. And so that happens every year. And this one particularly started in Mount St. Helens. And so I didn't do the 200-mile race, but after listening to her, I immediately signed up for one of the ultra races in that series. And I did the 40-mile race. And that race pretty much opened up trail running for me from then on. And I am hoping to pursue trail running fully pretty soon.
Yeah, it's such a different way of exploring an area. That's something you had mentioned was like trail running isn't just about racing or times. It's a great way to see these beautiful places and run on the trail. So it's, once you get a taste of it, I was the same way. It's like, ooh, what else is out there?
Yeah.
So yeah. And it sounds like it's been growing and becoming more of a bigger part of your life and identity, which is really great.
Yeah, definitely. It's been, I've kind of always been really curious. And so I guess trail running was also kind of a way, like you said, to explore different places. And even when I was a kid, I would just run off into the woods, which was problematic as a young child, but run off into the woods and just go look around and see what's in the stream or what's down past this little patch of trees and just kind of see what's out there. And I think that kind of translated to how I feel and look at the environment today, and still have that sort of innate drive to learn more about my surrounding areas.
Sounds like you were trail running in training from a young age.
Maybe.
So let's talk a little bit about your environmental action. What really inspired you to get involved?
So I feel like I've kind of been pretty environmentally oriented my entire life. Again, I've always been really curious about nature and was just always looking for cool animals or cool plants. And so I guess I always just had this sort of drive to care for something bigger than myself. And then once I got into middle school and high school and learned more about a lot of environmental issues, that's kind of when it really took hold in my brain that this is an avenue that I should pursue, one that I should go into, because there's so many problems in the world, and a lot of them can relate back to the environment and the way that people use it. And so yeah, I was pretty concerned with like conservation and climate change and pollution pretty early on. And so I did know I wanted to go into the environmental realm, but I always just had this idea that I was going to end up becoming an environmental lawyer, and it was going to be a pretty horrible existence, which is not to say anything about environmental lawyers, but like they don't win a lot of cases, unfortunately, and it just seems like it's a really good cause to be a part of, but it just seems like life would be really infuriating a lot of times.
You're battling an uphill battle
Yeah,
the entire time.
definitely an uphill battle, but for a good cause. So yeah, that kind of mindset where I really pursue these environmental issues I went into early on in college. And I didn't really know whether I wanted to get into research or not until probably halfway through college, and then kind of found my niche, I guess, in biology and marine biology. So that's where I am now, and I'm doing research related to environmental stressors, specifically those that are commonly seen with climate change, like elevated temperatures and hypoxia or low oxygen conditions, those effects on fish physiology. So I'm specifically studying a shark species, a skate species, which is related to a shark, but it looks more like a stingray, just without any sort of protective barb, and they're generally smaller. And then I also study basically energetics and metabolism related to protein turnover in sharks, and then again, hypoxia tolerance. So all of these sort of environmentally related stressors that are affecting physiology. So
you're really seeing a lot of this firsthand, not just, what we're seeing from our perspective as trail runners, but you're seeing it from the biology perspective of like what's happening, especially to these mammals that you're studying. So it's probably got to be a little bit sobering and just insightful at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely a wealth of information, which is really exciting to be able to share with people, but also very depressing to share with people. But yeah, it's like trying to find a good balance, I think, with being informed and knowing what actions to take, basically, when you know this information. So.
Yeah, I feel like we'll have to have another episode where we talk just about your research, because that's a fascinating topic as well. We've got some other cool things to talk about today, but it's just incredible to have kind of, different areas of your life both connect back to, these impacts that we're seeing on our climate and our weather patterns and our environment. And so I think you come at it from a really unique perspective. And we're really lucky to have you as part of the POW Trail team. And what first got you excited with working with Protect Our Winters?
Claire Gallagher, who did the episode earlier this week with Joe Grant in Colorado, she originally told me about POW and her connection with it, and just the way that she was describing it as this organization that's targeted towards the outdoors community, and how they're trying to mobilize this community to be more involved and speak out more about environmental action, because environmental degradation basically completely affects your lifestyle, completely affects the way that you use an outdoor space, and especially for trail running. And so being able to have a platform and an organization that is concerned with these issues is really important, and something that I've kind of been looking for, but didn't even realize that I was looking for it until she told me about it. And yeah, I think POW is just like a really great opportunity for me to blend my passion of the environment and science and scientific communication with running and getting in the outdoors. And exploring. And so, yeah, I think it was just a great match for me, and I really wanted to be involved.
Yeah, and it's a great way to make your voice heard and feel like you're able to take some action steps, because it can be a little tough as someone who is really into the outdoors. It's like, okay, I want to do these things, but I don't really know. I don't have the tools or the platform. And so Protect Our Winters is great for anyone involved, Alliance members, just people who, open emails, and just giving you hands-on tools that you can use to really feel like your voice is heard and makes a difference.
Exactly.
So a few weeks ago, you just tackled a big project across many different trails in North Carolina. Can you describe this project? It's really cool. I'm excited to have you kind of walk us through it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so a few weeks ago, I decided that I was going to run on trails across the entire state of North Carolina. And it was really cool because I'd been to some places around the state before, but I hadn't really seen it all kind of all at once and see the differences in the landscapes all together. So it was a really awesome project, and I was basically trying to highlight the trails and really cool spaces in the different regions of North Carolina, because most of the time when people consider trail running in North Carolina, they mostly think of the western part of the state, which is the more mountainous region, which is extremely beautiful. And the trails are really awesome, but it's not the only part of the state. And there are actually some really awesome trails throughout the rest of the state as well. And so I live in the coastal plain area right off of the coast, and being able to kind of highlight those spaces as well. And like the picture shown below is a trail that leads right out to the ocean. That's up at the Outer Banks. So it was just kind of a cool project for me to be able to highlight all of the different spaces, and not only the western part of the state, and also kind of show how diverse the state is. So to, I guess, break it up, there are basically 3 different regions of the state. So the western mountainous part, so it's part of the Southern Appalachian Mountains. And so I went to 2 trails there, and one was Roan Mountain, which is kind of on the border of Tennessee and North Carolina, as you see below. That was in a little gap area on a trail. There are a lot of really cool viewpoints that they have on this trail. And if you go a bit further past, you get on top of the Bald, which you see here, and you just see this really vast landscape of all the ridges around you. It was just really beautiful and breathtaking, especially I was there alone. Like no one was on the trail when I was there, which was amazing in itself. So it was really awesome. I went there, and then I also went to Pisgah National Forest, which is also part of the Southern Appalachian Mountains, and it's a bit outside of Asheville. I did this loop called the Deep Gap Loop, and it's like an 18-mile loop that actually is part of this really awesome trail called the Art Loeb Trail. And so the picture shown below is actually on top of Pilot Mountain, which is a mountain that's part of the Art Loeb Trail. It's just this really popular trail that a lot of people will backpack. And I actually backpacked it last year with my friend, and it was absolutely beautiful. But we did get stuck in a blizzard, which was kind of weird, but it was still really fun.
Looks for a good story.
Yeah, it was a really good story. It was awesome. So that was the western part of the state, and I did that for the first part of the week. And then I moved towards the middle region of the state, which is called the Piedmont area. And so it's this kind of really nice bridge between the western mountains and the coastal plain. And the Piedmont area transitions pretty easily to the coastal plain, and it's got a lot more of a lot less elevation, obviously, than the mountains. So the mountains range from an elevation of like 6,000 feet to 150 feet, it drops pretty quickly, and then you're pretty much in the Piedmont. So the 3 places that I ran in the Piedmont area were Crowder's Mountain, which is a bit outside of Charlotte. And Crowder's Mountain was really cool. I had never heard of it before, probably like a month ago. I was just looking through some state parks and really long trails throughout the state and came across Crowder's Mountain. It's basically kind of like an isolated peak. It's not really near any sort of area that has a lot of elevation. So it's just like a standalone mountain, basically, which was kind of weird, but also really cool and unique. So it's got these really cool, just basically drop straight down cliffs. And a lot of people will come here for climbing, but it also has a lot of really good trail running. I realized that part of the trail that I was on was a lot of scrambling, which I didn't realize that like before I got there. So I was very surprised and did a lot of scrambling that day, but it was really fun. So didn't mind it. And yeah, it was awesome. And then from Crowder's Mountain, I went to Umstead National Forest, which is right within Raleigh, North Carolina. And Umstead is beautiful. A lot of people use it. It's this forest that kind of connects all the metropolis area of Raleigh, because the cities surrounding Raleigh are like all pretty big for North Carolina. For other states, they're probably not that big, but it's basically the hub of North Carolina. And so a lot of people really use this trail a lot, and especially since COVID has been happening, so many people have been using this space even more. And unfortunately, the city is trying to build a quarry in Umstead National Forest, and a lot of people are really against it. And so they created this petition and an organization called Stop RDU Quarry. And that's the website below. They still have an active petition and active updates, but right now they're kind of on a hiatus and doing the quarry project, which is really good for this initiative and saving the forest, because a lot of people really want to keep this forest and keep it intact the way it is, because it services a lot of people. And then the next place I went was Roanoke Rapids, which is northern portion of the Piedmont area, and it's right along the Roanoke River. So pretty much right at the border of Virginia and North Carolina. And it's absolutely beautiful. You can see the river from the trail pretty much the entire way. And it's got a lot of wetlands and swamps as well. So that's what you're seeing below. And it was just breathtaking. And from there, the Piedmont kind of transitions to the coastal plain area, which again is pretty much where I am. And so I went to the Outer Banks, which North Carolina is really notable for, because the Outer Banks is huge. It's like, I forget how many miles it is, but there are over 2,000 miles of coastline in North Carolina, which is pretty insane. And so the Outer Banks encompasses a lot of that. So Outer Banks was beautiful. And then where I am, actually, I also ran at the cliffs of the new state park. And that was kind of an impromptu run. So you're seeing that here. There's also a lot of swampy area. A lot of the coastal plain is very swampy. So it can be kind of fun for like running through a lot of mud and just basically doing a lot of running and mud skipping or almost swimming sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, so that was really beautiful. And then I also ran at Holly Shelter, which is closer to where I am in Wilmington. And it's kind of a place that I go to all the time. It's like my little coastal gym, basically. I love it so much. It's like, it's kind of weird because it's very flat, obviously. And a lot of it is a long, straight dirt road, but it also has a lot of offshoot trails, and you can see a lot of wildlife in there. And so that's what makes it worthwhile. And in the mornings, there's this really cool fog line that will come up above the vegetation that you see, like the shrubby grass that you see underneath these really tall trees. And it's just beautiful. So I love it.
Yeah, North Carolina is kind of unique in that it has it all, from mountains to plains to coastal areas. And it's really cool you're able to highlight these trails and see the differences across one state. I think that's a pretty incredible feature for the state to have. Now, kind of connecting it into climate, what do you see with environmental changes or impacts of climate or extreme weather? Because we know that's kind of happening all over the country. How will this impact some of these areas?
So for me, at least where I am on the coast, hurricanes are obviously a pretty big issue. Pretty much every hurricane that comes along the Atlantic hits North Carolina, which is kind of unfortunate. That's a pretty big impact, and they're not necessarily increasing in frequency, but they're increasing in their intensity every time because of the warmer water. And so that creates a lot of issues for people on the coast and the coastal plain, especially with sea level rise occurring on the coastal plain. And there are already really bad flooding incidents here that just happen on normal days, like normal storm days. You can have flash floods. And so with climate change and increasing sea level rise and higher intensity hurricanes, it's just going to wash out a lot of these trails. And just remarking on the hurricane that just came through here about a month ago, or a little less than a month ago, it was a Category 1 hurricane, and it came through and was a lot more damaging than everyone thought it would be, because there was just debris everywhere. Trees were down, and like I couldn't access the trails for a few days, and everything was pretty washed out. And then for the rest of the state, so at least the middle portion of the state also gets hit by hurricanes as well sometimes, because the storms will move inland. When they reach the mountains have a lot of really big issues with flash flooding and landslides because of more intense rainfall. And then as well, just throughout the entire state, it's already pretty humid here. It's kind of, so North Carolina is considered like a subtropical forest. So it's very humid, like more humid than I was expecting, especially coming from Texas. It was already humid there. And so just coming here was kind of like, oh my gosh, again. And so with climate change, unfortunately, there are going to be a lot longer heat waves and just a lot higher humidity for a longer duration of time. And so that's not necessarily comfortable or wanted by everyone.
Right. It sounds like it's going to affect the entire state.
Yeah.
Regardless of the area.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is only considering just impacts that directly affect humans, but even if we're just considering like biodiversity changes, like trees, there's so many tree species in North Carolina, and a lot of them are very specific to different regions and shape these ecosystems. And with these rising temperatures, a lot of the faster growing tree species are kind of overtaking the slower growing tree species that make those areas unique. And so that's pretty concerning as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a good time to answer. We have a question coming in from the audience. What do you say to people who don't connect these issues of climate change with more severe hurricanes? And have you been able to bridge the gap in people's mind who maybe want to vote for climate deniers?
So that's like an ongoing debate I have with myself. I feel like for the hurricanes, at least, I think it's a bit easier to connect climate change with severe hurricanes because you can explain increases in temperature, especially water temperature, and how that kind of creates these more intense storms. I think you can connect that a little bit easier. And I know a lot of people don't like graphs, but myself as a scientist, I really like graphs to kind of explain how things are working. And so even just showing like a graph of the occurrence of a Category 3 hurricane occurring more often over like the past 20 years or so compared to a few decades prior to that is something that could be compelling to a person that doesn't really understand the connection between hurricanes and climate change.
Sounds like pointing to facts and showing a visual is
yeah. But also some people don't gravitate towards that. So it's definitely an ongoing thing that we have to try to figure out how to communicate this well to people.
Right. And I think, coming at it from like, not like an I'm right top down way, but like, okay, let's have an educated discussion about this is usually the best way to try to, not necessarily convince someone, but just let them see your side, what you're saying. But I understand the challenge. Do you know of any resources that you recommend for people to learn more about environmental justice?
Yeah, so actually there's this really awesome group that just started called Intersectional Environmentalist. And they kind of have these, little divisions based on environmental justice for different minority groups, as well as any sort of injustices between different sexual orientations or genders. And so they kind of just explain like the perspectives of each minority group and also what their specific climate impacts are, specifically in the US. And then I know at least for North Carolina, for anyone who's in North Carolina, there's a really awesome group called the North Carolina Conservation Network, and they specifically focus on environmental justice. And so there might also be a conservation network in your state as well.
We'll have to find that and share after the episode because I think that would be a great follow-up to have. Yeah. And this is a good time to mention right after this episode, we're going to end with the POW's Make a Plan to Vote tool, which is also a great resource. Not so much about learning about environment, but about getting out and making a plan to vote. And so once this episode wraps up, if everyone could just take like 30 seconds to fill that out, that's going to be a really helpful step. Share with your friends, family, anybody. But Peyton, this was really great to kind of get to know you and talk about your project a little bit. I mean, it's incredible seeing all the different climates and landscapes, trails across the state of North Carolina. I think there's so many great areas, so much open space, and it's a really important topic to discuss anywhere, but particularly in North Carolina, all the people who recreate and enjoy the outdoors. This fall is going to be an important time to get out and vote to protect these places because they are pretty special, and we only get one shot at this. So thank you for sharing that today. And also big shout out to Trail Runner Magazine for sponsoring this series. And again, we have 2 lucky winners from today's today's episode are going to win a year-long subscription to the magazine. So thank you again for supporting us. And we hope you'll tune in again next week. We have 2 more episodes. So we're going to New Hampshire with Abby Levine on Tuesday. Same time, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to talk a little with Abby about her recent adventures and a little bit about New Hampshire. So make sure to tune in. And then on a final note, we're going to end with that Make a Plan to Vote tool. So make sure to check it out. And Peyton, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us, and for everything that you do in both the trail running world and in your research. It's really incredible.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
As runners, we have to stand up for our playgrounds, for the quiet dirt road miles out the back door, the winding path along the river, the forest loop that washes the day away. To protect our winters and our planet, we must protect our trails. Together, with our feet, our voices, and our votes, we can save our great escapes. Make a plan to vote. Join the outdoor state.